All right, everybody, we are live here on a Friday, the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. I'm not going to lie, when I started planning the show, I started mapping out the shows for this week, and I usually at the beginning of the week, I start to kind of jot some things down for each day of something I know I want to get to or just plan heading into the weekend or whatever, especially on a Friday. I did not have kicking the show off with the Reds as part of the plan, but I was at Great American Ballpark last night, and there was just a different feel, a different energy, and the result that we all wanted to see. When I'm at a game and the playoffs are on the line, what I want to see is I want to see the stars show up and show out. And last night, we got to see that in the Reds' 1-0 shutout win over the Chicago Cubs in Game 1 of that 4-game, very important series. Now, the problem is the Reds won, but so did the Diamondbacks, so did the Giants, so did the Mets. So we are exactly where we were yesterday at this time, the Reds sitting 2 games back. But the problem is 2 games back yesterday at this time, they had 10 games to get something done. Now they have 9, but it doesn't matter. The Reds knew that all those other teams had wins, and the Reds knew that they had to win to still remain within at least 2 games of that final wild card spot. And boy, was that a heck of a game last night. So Hunter Greene, he goes the distance last night. A 1-hit complete game shutout over one of your biggest rivals in the Chicago Cubs. That is a big deal. The Chicago Cubs just clinched a playoff spot. Now, for a lot of you that say, well, they clinched a playoff spot, so they've probably taken their foot off the gas. I kind of would get that, but the Cubs are still within striking distance of the division. It's unlikely, but keep in mind, as we sit here right now, the Cubs were 5 games out of the division lead, now 6 games with that loss last night, the Brewers win. So, yeah, yes and no, but I will say when the Reds have played teams who have nothing to play for, they usually lose to those teams. The Reds have been a team since the All-Star break that have been within striking distance of a playoff spot, and they were so close to a playoff spot that's what made the front office jump at making moves at the deadline, buying at the deadline, being buyers and not being sellers. So if you want to sit there and discredit last night and say, well, yeah, if the Reds have success against the Cubs, they've already clinched a playoff spot, so it's not that impressive. It is impressive because the one thing that the Reds have not been able to do is, especially when there's an opportunity on the line or something big on the line, they haven't been able to take advantage of teams who have nothing to play for. They just got swept by a team that had nothing to play for in the Athletics. The Athletics should be counting down the days to end of the season because they've been out of the playoffs since, 3 months ago? So I'm not going to accept that one. I'm not going to accept that as a way to discredit what the Reds did last night. So I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio, Dayton's radio home for Cincinnati Reds baseball. Reds and Cubs will be back at it tonight. It's going to be a 6:40 first pitch as opposed to last night's 7:15. Last night's game was on Fox. And tonight's game, of course, just a regular, I almost said Bally Sports, but FanDuel TV, whatever the hell it is. But right here on 1410 ESPN Radio, that's all that matters. But when I go to a game like last night, and there's something big on the line, I want to see my stars show out. And Hunter Greene did that. Hunter Greene did that last night. Like I said, that was a big performance for him for a lot of reasons, right? Like, for one, he goes 9 innings, complete game. We don't see that very often in today's baseball. And it wasn't just that he went 9. It was just how efficient he was. He threw 109 pitches, 78 of his 109 pitches were strikes. He was efficient. He was getting guys out and getting guys out in a hurry. That game started at 7:15. The game was done by 9:30. And at one point, we were deep into the ball game. I think it was about the 7th inning, and the Reds and the Cubs had, they were being no hit at that point. The guy to break up, Suzuki was the guy to break up the no hitter. But he was 0 for 2 at that point, and he was able to get in there and obviously bloop one into the outfield to get a hit. So the bottom line is Hunter Greene showed up, balled out, goes 9 innings, complete game, strikes out 9, 109 pitches, 78 of those strikes. And to do that against the Cubs over one of the best lineups in baseball, that was just pretty damn impressive last night. And, Crow Armstrong, who has just been an absolute Reds killer on the season, he goes 0 for 3 last night. So that was big. Swanson goes 0 for 3. The whole top half, the whole top half of the order for the Cubs, they go let's see, that's 0 for 14 at the plate last night. That's key. That's clutch. I would have loved to see a little bit more firepower from the lineup for the Reds, but they do just enough to get it done. And how about Austin Hayes last night? He goes 2 for 3, drives in a run. He gets that double. And that was huge right there, of course. So, Benson gets another big one. He gets another double last night. Will Benson, how about him? I mean, he's the one that drove in the run. I'm sorry, last night when I brought that up a little bit ago, he drove in Austin Hayes, who had a double. Will Benson comes up a little bit later, and he drives in Austin Hayes off his double as well. So, again, Will Benson's been one of the best storylines of this season. And when I say best, and I say best storylines, and it hasn't always been a great storyline. The storyline with Will Benson has been the fact that, you know what? He should have been on this roster more. I mean, the fact that we didn't see him for pretty much all of August is kind of crazy. And then when the Reds do call him up and give him these big opportunities, the Reds don't beat the Cardinals without him. The Reds don't win that Padres series without him. So I look at this team right now and the guys are getting contributions from. It's not consistent enough, in my opinion, but it's just enough to keep them in the conversation. But we're going to need more from guys. Like you can't have your top two, or not top two, but your hitters in the 1 and 2 spot going 1 for 8 on a nightly basis. Like TJ Friedel's been cooling off a bit. Gavin Lux last night goes 1 for 4. Austin Hayes 2 for 3. That was big time. Sal Stewart, who's been phenomenal since being called up, he kind of went cold last night. He got the start at third. We saw Brian Hayes come in late to pinch hit for him, but that was more so bringing him in just to make sure that there was a defensive presence in that infield, especially as the Reds were trying to close that game out last night. And, let's not forget, Elly De La Cruz committed his 25th error of the season. He leads Major League Baseball in that category. Can we just stop this? That coffee tastes so damn good. Could we just stop this Elly De La Cruz at shortstop thing now? Maybe not now, like finish the season, but man, if they get into the playoffs, are we really going to act like he's not a liability? Are we really going to act like Elly De La Cruz, which is something that it sounds weird coming out of my mouth? It doesn't sound right. Doesn't feel right even saying it. But man, oh man, he's a liability out there. And, he's 0 for 6 in his last 2 games. He's 1 for 8 in his last 3. And he's 2 for 11 in his last 4. And 2 for 15, 2 for 18, 3 for 22. If you just keep going down the list, like his production has just completely disappeared. He has scored 1 run, in that time frame. So like Elly De La Cruz is becoming a liability, as wild as that sounds. I mean, look, the bottom line is if you would have told me back in March that Elly De La Cruz was going to have scored 1 run in a 8-game span and that he was going to be 2 for 26 in the, these games leading into the final stretch and that the Reds still have a chance to make the playoffs, I would have said no way. There's a lot of reasons why this team should not and probably won't make the playoffs. But the reason that this team has the opportunity to be in this conversation is because of what we saw last night. Hunter Greene is a dude. Hunter Greene was a superstar last night, and that's what the Reds needed. My biggest complaint about the Reds at times over in years, even when they've had like their really good players, your Vottos and others, is, and Votto did this early in his career. Votto was always a clutch hitter. He was a clutch guy. And then he got to a certain point where he wasn't coming through in the clutch as much, and it was very frustrating. The guy that you counted on to drive in runs, the guy that you counted on to be the guy that produces and puts the team on the board, that kind of went away. For him, the Reds have never had their star player be the guy in clutch moments. And Elly was that 2 years ago. He's lost that fire and magic. And to see, and we've seen big, pitching performances like in big moments, but not from the stars. Like, I think it just means more when you have Hunter Greene go out there. Like, for instance, Brady Singer could have gone out there and thrown 9 innings of 1 hit, baseball, right? And that would have been phenomenal. That would have been fantastic. We would have talked about how the Reds dominated in that trade, getting Brady Singer for Jonathan India, right? Like from the Royals. That's phenomenal. That's great. But there is just more of an intimidation factor when you have your ace, when you have your Cy Young candidate, when you have your superstar pitcher go out there and pitch like a superstar, and not just pitch like a superstar in a meaningless game in September, but with your team 2 games out of a playoff spot, everyone else went around you. So you are trying to stay and keep up with them. That to me is why last night felt different. I've seen this team win games to keep them in the hunt. It's been random big pitching performances from a Brady Singer, right? We've seen that from, you know what I mean? Like we get that from Lytle. Lytle could have pitched that game last night, and it would have been big time. We would have talked about the depth of the pitching. But I want to see, like, what made the Big Red Machine was the Big Red Machine star players making clutch plays in the biggest, brightest moments of the season. And my problem is Elly De La Cruz disappears in those moments. And we, and for Hunter Greene, he hasn't been available for those moments. He's been injury prone. That's a problem for star athletes in Cincinnati, apparently. But last night was different. And I'm really, really buying back in if the Reds continue to get performances like that from their star players. The problem is you're running out of time. You only have 9 games left. Everyone won last night. And that's kind of where we're at this moment. So, right now, as far as the wild card standings are concerned, as we sit here on a Friday heading into the weekend, the Reds are 77-76. The good thing about this, okay, the good thing about the Reds win last night, and I said that the Diamondbacks and Giants won last night. I apologize. They did not. The Mets won. The Reds needed to win to keep up with the Mets. The Diamondbacks and Giants lost last night. So the Diamondbacks are 77-76, tied with the Reds with the same record. And then the Giants are 76-77. Here's the good thing. The Reds legitimately have a shot here, guys. They legitimately have a shot. The Mets are 3-7 in their last 10, okay? The Reds went out last night, and they followed their superstar pitcher in Hunter Greene, and they're obviously going to have to do the same thing tonight with Nick Lodolo on the mound. And the great thing is you have Andrew Abbott on the mound after Brady Singer. I love all the pitchers that are being rolled out there. The Reds have a legitimate shot, guys, because the Diamondbacks and Reds right now are tied with the same record. But guess what? The Reds won that season series. They hold the tiebreaker. If the Reds and the Mets end up tied with the same record, by the way, guess what? The Reds hold that tiebreaker. If the Reds and the Giants and the Diamondbacks and the Mets all finish the season with the exact same record, guess who holds that tiebreaker? The Cincinnati Reds. The Reds have every opportunity to make some noise and to make the postseason. They've made me quit on them multiple times. They've made me fall in love with them multiple times. It's exhausting. I'm having fun, though. Today, by the end of tonight, I might be pissed off again. But the bottom line is the Reds are 77-76. There is no team between them and the Mets right now. The Reds, are the I guess, the first loser, if you will. They would be the first team out, if you want to use the March Madness references and all that stuff. But they're 2 games back, tied with the Diamondbacks, a game ahead of the Giants, 3 games ahead of the Cardinals, who they just beat in a big series. And they just took game 1 last night against a team that is 23 games above 500, and they dominated them on their home field last night. So kudos to the Reds. Kudos to them for getting me to buy back in. I love all that, and I'm excited about, this series with the Cubs moving forward. I just hope the Reds could follow up because they have a habit of when they have a big performance, not being able to string back-to-back great performances together. They need to be able to do that coming up here later on tonight. All right, I'm Justin Radio. I haven't checked that yet. My apologies. Leave your comments. Did last night feel different? The Reds have got some big wins throughout the back half of the season to pull them back within the 2 games, a game and a half, a game, a half a game. But last night just felt different. It was the star players stepping up and making big clutch plays when they needed to, big defensive plays. Obviously they didn't produce a lot of runs, but clutch hitting and opportunistic hitting. And then, of course, Hunter Greene, the Reds ace, Cy Young contender. Maybe not this season because he's missed a lot of games, but last night you've seen what he's capable of. Get that guy into the post. There was so much pressure last night on Hunter Greene. It didn't faze him at all. In fact, it almost fueled him. Put that guy on the mound game 1 of a playoff series. If I'm the Dodgers, I don't want to face Hunter Greene in game 1. If I'm the Dodgers, I don't want to face Hunter Greene or Andrew Abbott. The Reds pitchers don't want to face their batting. I get that. But at the same time, I'll take the Reds have the best position. When you look at the Diamondbacks, when you look at the Giants and the others, the teams that could get that final playoff spot, no team has the pitching like the Reds do to go at the Dodgers. That's what I'm most fascinated by. Just get there, Reds. Just get there. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, we welcome you back live here on a Friday. I'm Justin Kinner, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Okay, the NFL is big on legacy. All sports. Sports is all about legacies. And how athletes are remembered is for their legacy. And what you don't want is everyone's going to have, your legacy and how you're viewed by your team for what you did with your team. But you want a legacy that's going to be left behind, that's going to be remembered for what you did in the league as a whole. And I think what's starting to happen now, and this is what's unfortunate for Joe Burrow regarding this injury and being out for another 3 months. And like I said, I think he's out for the year. I don't, he's having surgery today, and that would put him 3 months from today would be December 19th. So he would miss that Ravens game. I don't see how the Bengals aren't going to be in this. They're just, you can't, this team missed the playoffs last year with Joe Burrow healthy, with all the deficiencies they had last year, and all those same deficiencies exist this year. And now you don't have Joe Burrow, and you want me to believe that they're going to be in the playoff. If they're still in the playoff race in mid-December, I think that's a big hit on on the perception of Joe Burrow. You take Josh Allen off the Bills, they're not competing for anything. You take Lamar off the Ravens, they're not competing for anything. We've seen that. We've seen the Ravens be in first place at the halfway point, past the halfway point of the season. We've seen Lamar be injured and out for the rest of the season and then drop from first to worst, or hang on and barely make the playoffs as a wild card team. And by the way, that was the year they had Huntley and they almost beat the Bengals, but that's besides the point. You lose your starting quarterback, your season's toast. You're done. You know what I mean? Like that. And so if the Bengals do go on to do it, although that's going to be great for Zach Taylor, it's going to be great for the Bengals organization and the fan base, I don't think that's a good thing for Joe Burrow. There's just a lot of things that aren't going well for Joe Burrow right now, and there's not a lot of positive outcomes. One positive outcome is he heals up and gets back within the 3 months, and that this isn't a complicated injury that lingers and impacts him moving forward. But legacies in the NFL matter, and right now the only legacy that Joe Burrow has been forming is just a Cincinnati Bengals legacy. Right now, the only thing Joe Burrow is doing is basically carving a path to the Bengals Ring of Honor that he'll have to pay for his flight and own hotel for by the time we get to that point, right? Like, that's the only thing he's carved. What is he doing right now to carve a legacy across the league? No all-league honors, no MVPs. His biggest accomplishment was a Super Bowl loss. Like, there's nothing significant about that. I've seen Jared Goff go to the Super Bowl twice with two different teams. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've seen quarterbacks get to a Super Bowl. I've seen Jalen Hurts get to 2 Super Bowls, and he's 1-1. He's been to multiple, and those guys were drafted in the same class. I'm watching Josh Allen last night. I'm watching Justin Herbert in the first couple of weeks here. Jordan Love is phenomenal with the Packers. I'm not the biggest Jordan Love guy, but I'm not going to deny how good he has been for Green Bay and how good Green Bay looks. And we know how the MVP award works. It's a storyline driven league. I'm watching the Bills last night, and I'm watching Josh Allen drop back to throw the football. And I'm like, these weapons, they're not even weapons. He's bringing a knife to gunfights. He doesn't have pass catchers, guys. Like, he doesn't have his leading receiver last night was a tight end. Dalton Kincaid had 5 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown. Shakur had 4 catches, 45 yards and a touchdown. Elijah Moore had the 3rd most targets on the team last night. Elijah Moore. Like, that's wild to me that to Keon Coleman, 4 targets, 3 catches, 10 yards. He doesn't have pass catchers. And I'm watching Josh Allen just continue to lead his team down the field. And guess what? He has a run game. Josh Allen, I think very much so values his run game. I think he would love to have a T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. I'm pretty sure he would love to have a Tyreek Hill and a Jalen Waddle. But I think he loves his offensive line. I think he loves his run game. I think he loves his defense. I think he loves complimentary football. And I think he loves his MVP award. Sure, he would love to put up the fantasy football stats that Burrow does. But from a legacy standpoint, Josh Allen's going to be remembered in this league significantly longer than Joe Burrow at the pace of which both their careers are going. I'm watching Josh Allen last night. They're 3-0. And it's a storyline-driven league when it comes to the MVP award. And we just watched Josh Allen win it last year. But have you guys seen the schedule for Buffalo? Like Josh Allen in Buffalo, this is what's coming up. Okay, they're 3-0 already. They have the Saints, Patriots, Falcons, Panthers for the next month, for the next 4 weeks. That's a 7-0 start. Then the first team of resistance that they play is going to be the Chiefs. And I'm not sure how good the Chiefs are. That could be an 8-0 start. Then they play the Dolphins. And now they do play the Bucs and the Texans, obviously in mid-November at that point. But this team could be sitting at double-digit wins before they even get to Cincinnati on their schedule. And by the way, that will not be Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen. We will miss out on that head-to-head quarterback duel right there. The Bills are going to win a ton of games. They're going to have this division wrapped up by mid-November. And his legacy is going to continue to build. And I think that's significant, right? Talked about Jordan Love earlier. Jordan Love, it's a storyline-driven league. Like, Jordan Love is a guy that is going to be probably the quarterback on maybe the best team in football. They look like it a couple weeks in. As good as the Bills look, I think the Bills are a very, very good team. I think that the difference is I think that the Packers have more weapons. It's just a matter of Jordan Love versus, Josh Allen, who's the better two of the quarterbacks. I'll take Josh Allen every day of the week, but it's a storyline-driven league, and when the Packers are the best team in football, if they do continue on that trajectory, Jordan Love is going to be in very good position to win that MVP award as well. And then you got Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's been putting up phenomenal numbers. His number one wide receiver is a 33-year-old Keenan Allen. Can Keenan Allen sustain this run that he's on right now? Just a heck of a pass catcher, a heck of a receiver, route runner, all that. It's a storyline-driven league. Justin Herbert with Jim Harbaugh as his head coach, and the Chargers win the AFC West division, a division that has the Broncos, a Super Bowl contender, the Chiefs who have owned that division. They've owned the AFC. If Justin Herbert leads the Chiefs to an AFC West title, yes, I think that Justin Herbert, from a storyline perspective, that's your MVP right there. I think that, Jordan Love and the Packers, if they end up being as, better than the Eagles, that's your MVP right there. Maybe Jalen Hurts gets that. There are now that the league that had a youth quarterback movement, right? We bid farewell to Tom Brady. We bid farewell to Drew Brees. Aaron Rodgers still hanging on for dear life, right? Like, we've bid farewell to the previous era of quarterbacks. There was an overlap there. It was the overlap of Tom Brady, obviously, with Patrick Mahomes. We got to see a brief overlap there, right? Hand off the baton. But now the Jordan Loves, they're more than a few years into the league. Burrow's more than a few years in the league. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love now. These guys have all been in the league for years now. And now everything's clicking. And now legacies are starting to be formed and defined. And what looked like a few years ago that Joe Burrow was just going to be, it was going to be Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes on this Peyton Manning, Tom Brady trajectory. That's not the case anymore. Joe Burrow can't stay healthy. He can't stay on the field. He hasn't been in the playoffs for the last 2 years, and it's probably going to be 3 years now since Joe Burrow last seen the playoffs, which is crazy. So I bring this up because now that these quarterbacks who have been healthy and in the league for a while, their careers and their legacies are starting to be formed. We've seen Patrick Mahomes win multiple MVPs and multiple Super Bowl MVPs. He's at the top of the mountain. Lamar Jackson's right up there as well, who has multiple MVPs. All he does is win. All he does is get to the playoffs. We're waiting for him to take that next step, obviously, to get to an AFC championship game, get to a Super Bowl, win a Super Bowl. Same thing with Josh Allen. Josh Allen just won his first MVP last year. That could have been the third MVP for Lamar Jackson when it was all said and done. That's how tight that race was. And then you look at this year. Who could, again, it's week 2, week 3 now. MVP, it's kind of silly to talk about. It's not like I'm really like pushing who's going to win the MVP, but we know how this works. And we know it's a quarterback award. Joe Burrow being out for another pretty much full season, it keeps setting him behind and behind and behind. Legacies are being formed around him. Quarterbacks are surpassing him. 2 years ago, it looked like Joe Burrow, who was, getting to a Super Bowl in only year 2. And the future was bright because you had Joe Burrow on a rookie deal, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. All these stars were on rookie deals. Man, the future was bright. They didn't capitalize on it. And the team has gotten worse and worse every single year. And now you have Jordan Love, who could potentially win his first MVP, maybe win a Super Bowl. We saw it last year with Jalen Hurts. Not just won his first Super Bowl, that was his second Super Bowl appearance, but he won his first Super Bowl and won a Super Bowl MVP. What if Jordan Love wins his first Super Bowl this year? That's another young quarterback that has surpassed Joe Burrow. Josh Allen has surpassed Joe Burrow. Lamar Jackson's been well ahead of Joe Burrow. Patrick Mahomes is ahead of Joe Burrow. You know, what happens if Justin Herbert, can you imagine if Justin Herbert surpasses Joe Burrow by winning an MVP or getting to a Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl with Jim Harbaugh? This injury, to me, is, yes, it impacts 2025, but I think it is a huge gash on the resume and the big picture legacy of Joe Burrow. You know, when you think of Joe Burrow, you should be thinking about, like, I remember the Rams, the greatest show on turf, right? When you had your Kurt Warner, and, you know, you had Marshall Faulk, and you had those great receivers. You had, you know, Torrey Holt. You had all these guys. You remember that show. You remember the type of high, you know, powered offense that they were. They were kind of ahead of their time, obviously. But I look at you should be able to remember this Bengals team for that, and you're not going to be able to, because the only thing you think about with this Bengals team, unfortunately, is the constant slow starts, the horrible offensive line play, your quarterback being compared to Andrew Luck for how many times he's been hit, and he's been hit significantly more at this point of his career compared to Andrew Luck, who was hit at this much, you know, at this point of his career, and he retired early because of it. You remember the bad defenses. You remember the fact that they've had so many they've missed the playoffs so many times. Joe Burrow's only made the playoffs twice. This is year number 6 of Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. He's made the playoffs twice. And yes, you can comb through and make an excuse for each year. You could do the same thing. Well, Justin Herbert has it. Oh, well, that was the year all his receivers were injured. Oh, well, that's the year that they had Staley, the goofy coach that's from Dayton, right? Like they had Staley there. Oh, last year was the first year for Harbaugh. You know, and this year, if they fail, well, his oldest receiver was 33-year-old Keenan Allen. Like, we could do this excuse game for all these quarterbacks across the board. Joe Burrow's not special when it comes to excuses. Every quarterback has it. Patrick Mahomes, what a bum. He lost that Super Bowl last year. Well, yeah, his best pass catcher in the Super Bowl last year is a pop concert groupie for his now fiance, Taylor Swift. Like, yeah, his best pass catcher is a guy that's not even really fully diving into football anymore. He's all about his love life and the touring and everything with Taylor Swift and everything else. We could play that game. He doesn't have a Jamar Chase, he doesn't have a T. Higgins, and we could also make excuses, by the way. His receivers constantly in trouble, constantly hurt. So I don't want to hear about injuries. I don't want to hear about bad defenses. I don't want to hear about, the bad special teams. Every quarterback has an excuse. Like, we know Justin Herbert's good, but they haven't had loaded rosters that have missed the playoffs. They've had banged up, injured rosters with bad coaching, but it's still on him to get them there. Just like it's still on Joe Burrow to not just get them there, but to physically be out there. And he's never out there. He's not, he's injury prone, and that's the concern, and that's the problem. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. But last night watching that game, I'm watching Josh Allen and just watching him just find ways to move that ball up and down the field. I just don't get how, as Bengals fans, and I'm not trying to challenge you guys every single day, but I just feel this isn't like me just saying things to say things. This is how I feel. I don't know how you could watch the Bills, even the Chiefs, who you don't deem, they're 0-2, and I know you don't care for the Chiefs, but the Chiefs, who it's all about building a balanced roster. I don't get how you look at the teams that have success. You look at the Packers, you look at the Eagles, you look at what the Chiefs have done in recent years. You look at how the Chargers have kind of come to life again, because it's all about the run, the pass, the guys up front, the defense. It's all about being balanced. They became obsessed with the pass game. They became obsessed with the fantasy football numbers. They became obsessed with it, and they got away from the true blueprint of how teams win football games. Sure, you made, if the Bengals would have got rid of T. Higgins, that would have made them worse. Well, it would have been up to them to use the resources that they wouldn't have used to keep T. Higgins to improve other aspects of their game, whether it be the offensive line, whether it be defense. Sure, you may lose. The Chiefs, by the way, the last 2 years, the Chiefs have not been very sexy. They have not been the team that they were when they had Tyreek Hill and more of Travis Kelce in his prime. But they've taken steps back, but they had to distribute money more onto the defensive side of the ball. They had to move on from Tyreek Hill. They had to become more balanced. And that's the one thing, that's the one silver lining that could possibly come from this injury is that the front office could sit back and say, all right, Joe, I know you like your buddies. You like to be out with your boys, but maybe just text him after the game because we got to keep you upright. And as you know, we love you out on that field, which means we want to keep you out on that field as long as possible, which means we want a defense that's going to quickly get opposing offenses off the field so that you can come out and do your thing. And then when you do come out to do your thing, you could be comfortable knowing that you have a big wall of good offensive linemen to protect you. I just don't get how you could look at the Bills game last night, watch how they operate. Sure, they're boring. The Bills are not that exciting. The Packers, by the way, they're not that exciting either. The Eagles, I watched that Eagles-Chiefs game. That was a good, hard-hitting football game. But, guys, that was boring. I watched the Bengals last Sunday. That was fun. I'm watching Jamar Chase run all up and down the field. T. Higgins making spectacular catches. I'm watching the Jaguars make big throws. Trevor Lawrence and company. Sure, that game's more exciting. But do you want an exciting product or do you want a playoff product? And I'm not saying that you can't have both. But at the same time, look around the league. The Eagles are boring. The Eagles have Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley, and they're a ground and Jalen Hurts, who's a Super Bowl MVP quarterback, by the way, who has outplayed Patrick Mahomes twice in 2 Super Bowls. They have all these stars, but you watch them, and it's just ground and pound, boring football. But it's we love that. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm enjoying it, but like sure, it's more exciting to watch Jamar Chase just beat cornerbacks and safeties down the field wide open for big explosive plays. That's awesome. You're like the NBA team that puts up 130 points a game, but gives up 125 points per game. And you just don't feel like you're watching good. I feel like the Bengals are the James Harden of the NFL. The Bengals are the James Harden of the NFL. They're fun to watch. They're exciting to watch. They put up a lot, but there's so many deficiencies that it keeps them from being that megastar. I will take a more boring superstar that doesn't do all the flash and doesn't do all this and that. I'll take a Jokic. The Bengals need to be more Jokic than James Harden. It's a weird crossover. I completely get it. Maybe I'll get Kevin here. Maybe Kev will see where I'm coming from with this. But I think in today's NFL, boring is good. The Chargers were more exciting years ago when they had Keenan Allen and they had all those weapons in that pass game when they were healthy, right? But this Chargers team is boring, but they're good. This Eagles team is boring, but they're good. This Packers team, vanilla, but they're good. The Bengals are a loaded roster. They're exciting, but they're not very good. Be boring. Being boring is the best way to put your team in position to go win football games, as far as I'm concerned. All right, I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers home fun and spirit. I want to get back to the Reds a little bit. I was very happy with that. Hunter Green said something last night in the post game that I think rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way. And it didn't rub me the wrong way, but when Hunter Green said it, I thought Hunter Green came off a little tone deaf. Hunter Green went 9 innings last night, striking out 9 batters, had a no-hitter into the 7th, only gave up 1 hit on the night. A big win for the Reds to keep him in the playoff race. But man, oh man, did Hunter Green sound tone deaf in the post-game press conference. I'll have that clip for you when we come back, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts. We'll discuss more coming up. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers.
It was a lot of fun. Just like I said, was just trying to stay in the moment. I wish there were a little bit more fans in the stands, but for the fans that were here, I'm glad I was able to put on a show for them, and we were able to get a win tonight.
With where you guys are, do you feel like that? You talk about the fans. Is there convincing that needs to be done still for the fans to show up in a big way with the rest of this home stretch?
We're just trying to handle our business. The more support that we can get, obviously, the better. We feel, not that, we're already motivated enough for us to go out there and win. I'm not saying we can only win if we have fans. But you see, the best teams that are winning and doing their thing, and they have that atmosphere that they're in. So it's something that we strive for, and hopefully we can bring that back.
All right. That was Hunter Greene last night in the post game. In the post game. And I tell you what, wasn't a fan of that comment. And to be fair, I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm overblowing that. I don't know. I just don't call out. I don't think players. Man, I'm so in between on this, as you can tell. I just thought it was a little tone deaf. I think the players have to understand where we're coming from. Like, I know that the players are fighting and playing hard, but you also need to have a very good, firm grasp of this team's history. And this isn't like a spoiled fan base that, we get to the playoffs regularly, and this is just one of those years where you're just hovering above 500 and just fighting to make the playoffs, and we're bored. No, we have seen this movie before. We all feel like we know how this is going to end. And I think it's frustrating when you hear Hunter Greene say, we wish there were more fans here in the stands. We wished you didn't get swept by the A's. We wish that you didn't have a losing record against losing teams. We wish that it wouldn't even make it worse. The fact that you have a winning record against winning teams and a losing record against losing teams make sense. We wish that you didn't squander so many opportunities throughout the season. And you're saying, well, this is just one season. It's not one season. It's every season. Last year, if you remember, the Reds had a huge opportunity. They went and swept the Yankees, if you remember. And it felt like they were trending in the right direction, get hot, and then what happened? They got swept by the Tigers. Now, the Tigers ended up being a playoff team when it was all said and done, but the bottom line is to just constantly toy with the emotions of Reds fans, to constantly be in that position where you get Reds fans' hopes up, and then to have the rug pulled out from underneath them. I know that the players are frustrating as well, but what you don't get to say is, yeah, we wish players were there. You look at he just said that if you look at the teams who are good around baseball, they have fans. Well, are they good because the fans are there, or are the fans there because they're good? And are the Reds good? And would they be better if more fans were there? More fans would be there if you were better. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of finger pointing going on right now, and I don't really know who's to blame. I understand the players' perspective, but there was a stretch last year where the Reds were, of course, they had just lost a series to the Cardinals, or they split a series with the Cardinals in 2024. They were 39-45. They were 4 games out of a playoff spot, and they were heading into the home stretch. As the first half of the season was winding down. And the reason this was a big deal is because the Reds at the time had a Tigers team that was below 500 on their schedule. The Rockies and Marlins were the 2 worst teams in baseball. And the Reds had 7 games with the Rockies and the Marlins before the All-Star break last year. And then they swept the Yankees, and you're like, holy crap. So they're 3 games below 500. They're within a striking distance of a playoff spot to take momentum into the All-Star break. And then they lost 3 straight to the Tigers. Right? And then it just completely evaporated all the excitement. We've seen this movie before. How many times this year have the Reds got to within a half game of a playoff spot, and then they lose multiple series in a row, or they got swept? They didn't get swept. They were the last team in baseball to get swept this year. And one of the sweeps, they've only been swept twice, and one of those sweeps is against the last place Athletics. I don't even know what they're not the Oakland Athletics, whatever the hell they are, though. Whatever the hell they are, Athletics. That's where we're at right now when it comes to this Reds team. Whatever the hell they are, Athletics. That's who they lost to. So, I get Hunter Greene's point. I'm sure he does wish more fans were there. I was one of the fans in attendance last night. And by the way, Hunter Greene was not bad-mouthing fans. I don't want to frame it that way. I get what he's saying. But I would sit this one out, pal. I would not question Reds fans for not showing up to the ballpark. we've seen this movie before. And I think what Reds fans need to see is something that is going to make them believe that when they go sit down to watch the rest of the movie, that it's not going to be the same. Like, I don't like the Halloween movies. They're the same damn movie every time. Same thing. No, the Scream movies, same thing. You tune in, you sit down, you go to the movie theater, or you watch it at home. You know how it's going to start. You know how it's going to kind of take off in the middle, and you know exactly how it's going to end. You know exactly how every single Halloween movie is going to end. You know exactly how every Scream movie is going to end. Like, you know what I mean? Now, those movies are great. They keep putting them out. People keep going and watching them. And people do keep watching the Reds. But at the same time, the popularity of those movies have died down over the years because, I'm not going to stop what I'm doing to go watch a movie that I already know how it's going to end. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Cincinnati Reds. I need to see something that we haven't seen before, or at least within recent Reds history. And last night was fun. And by the way, I'm not being negative here. I opened up today's show. You can, if you missed the beginning of the show, don't worry, you can go back and watch it. But the bottom line is, this Reds team last night, that was a big time win. I gave a ton of props to Hunter Green, who goes 9 innings, those 9 pitches, 78 of those were strikes, very efficient. Just, absolutely mowed them down. He was beyond elite last night. And I said this before. I was like, if Lytle was on the mound last night and had that performance, that would have been great. We would be saying, oh man, the Reds have depth in the rotation and how awesome that is. If Brady Singer would have done that, that would have been great. But there's something about when a superstar on your team physically carries you to a must-win game that there's just something that is different about it. It gets me to buy in a little bit more. Hunter Green's on the mound. I feel confident that the Reds can beat any team in baseball. I feel confident that if the Reds make the playoffs, that Hunter Green on the mound, I feel confident that in game 1 against the Dodgers, do I feel confident that they could beat the Dodgers in the series? No. But do I feel confident that the Reds could beat the Dodgers in game 1 with Hunter Green on the mound? I do. And then you already have a 1 game up on the Dodgers. Things get interesting at that point. With that Reds rotation, anything is possible. When you get to the postseason, anything is possible. Getting to the postseason, that's where it seems to be impossible for this Reds team. And they have a chance. They're 2 games out. So last night, everyone kind of bummed. It was a big win, but they didn't really make up any ground. But they created, there was some separation there. Okay. We talked about this in the opening segment, and the Reds back in action tonight, game 2 against the Cubs, by the way. But there was a separation that was created in the wild card. And so the Mets, they won last night, as did the Reds. So the Reds remain 2 games back of the Mets. But the Diamondbacks lost last night, the Giants lost last night, and the Cardinals. I think we could officially say with 9 games left that the Cardinals are not going to get that final playoff spot. That's why that series win over the Cardinals for the Reds was big time. That kind of keeps them at bay. But the Diamondbacks and Reds have the same record. The Giants are 1 game behind the Reds. If the Reds finish with the same record as the Diamondbacks or the Giants, the Reds hold that tiebreaker. So that was a big win last night. If the Reds and the Mets finish with the same record, okay, if they finish with the exact same record, the Reds win that tiebreaker. The Reds actually are in a very good position. The Reds are the Mets are in the best position because they have a 2-game lead on these teams. So, but it's up to them to sustain it and hold it. They're 3-7 in their last 10. They've been trying to give it away all season, but the Reds don't completely quit on them. Not yet. There's 9 games left. Every time I get a little upbeat about this team, they go out and lay a stinker. So we'll see what they do tonight with Nick Lodolo on the mound. But man, if the Reds and the Mets finish with the same record, they hold that tiebreaker. There's not one team that holds a tiebreaker over the Reds at this point. That, to me, of all the bad situation that the Reds are in, they have the best situation of the bad situations, if you will, if that makes sense. I like the Reds' chances because of that. But last night, when the Mets won, had the Reds lost that, they only put 1 run up on the board. It's not as if that was a guaranteed win for the Reds last night. That was a 1-0 shutout win over the Cubs with your pitcher going 9 innings, throwing a complete game, only walking 1 batter, striking out 9, taking a no-hitter into the 7th and having it broke up by Suzuki on a 2-out double. And it started to feel, and by the way, there was 1 hard hit ball in the 8th that I'm like, oh man, it's gone. That's it. Not that the Reds were done, but the game was going to, go on longer, but Man, that was a humongous win last night. So I wanted to make sure I ended on a positive note, even though I kind of went in on Hunter Green's comments in the post game. I just thought that was a little tone deaf. Be excited about where the Reds are at. Be excited about what he did last night. But what I don't think he should do is question why the Reds fans aren't there yet. But he's right. They're going to need you. They're going to need us fans to fill up that ballpark just to give them that extra juice. But man, what you don't want is to fill up that ballpark and have them lose a 3-0 game, 2-0 game, or have a 5-3 lead and heading into the ninth and then losing 6-3 in extras, because then that becomes that movie, the ending that we've seen over and over and over, and we're tired of it. I'm Justin Kinner, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. The Buckeyes are off this weekend, obviously a bye week, so we will not be at Submarine House, at a Submarine House tomorrow. But we will be in Kettering tonight for the Fairmont-Wayne game. Keith Byers and I will be on the call. 6:30 pregame coverage begins with a 7 o'clock kickoff. Wayne had a big win last week over Springboro. Fairmont gets a big win over Centerville. And now these two teams going head-to-head here tonight. A little bit of a slow start for both teams in the non-con, but they're rolling already as conference play. GWAC play kicked off last week, and it continues tonight. Fairmont welcomes in Wayne. It's our Week 5 Gridiron Game of the Week. How about that? The halfway point. No Buckeyes tomorrow on Sunday, Week 3 of the NFL season, although it technically kicked off last night as we talked about. But Kev Nash and Keith Byers will be at the Frickers in Miamisburg, the 741 location. So keep that in mind for the Sunday morning tailgate, 11:30 to 1 p.m. Keith Byers and Kev Nash will recap college football Saturday and get you set for that day's slate of NFL games and talk Browns, Bengals, Kev Nash's Steelers, Keith Byers' Eagles, all of that. Show up to Frickers in Miamisburg Sunday morning at 11:30 for the Sunday morning tailgate show. Hour number 1 in the books. We now head into hour number 2. A lot more to get into. We'll get back into the NFL, touch on the Browns a little bit as they're playing for their season. They're playing for their season on Sunday. Joe Flacco possibly playing for his career. We'll talk about all that when we come back. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. All right, everybody, we welcome you back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. All right, so no Buckeye football coming up this weekend. Ohio State on a bye week. They're 3-0. They're the number one team in the country. They're the defending national champions. Everything's good, right? Like I don't know what else there is to really say about Ohio State at this point, but we did have the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, on yesterday. A couple things we discussed, from the expectations of what we had for Ohio State before the season kicked off to where they are at now here at this bye week. How does Paul Keels view how this team is? Paul Keels, how does he view this team as far as how they've developed to this point? He gave his thoughts, of course, on the development of Julian Sayin. Obviously, when you look at the expectations that we had for Jeremiah Smith, living up to those, but what about some other surprise players that have kind of come into the mix a little bit? What did Paul Keels have to say about that? We even discussed Joe Burrow at the end. So if you missed our conversation with the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, we have all of that for you right here. We even took a look at some of the biggest matchups in the Big Ten coming up this weekend, week 4 of the college football season. If you missed our conversation yesterday with the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, we have it for you right here. Every Thursday with the voice of the Buckeyes, Mr. Paul Keels. Paul, happy Thursday. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Justin?
I'm not bad. Excited to have you on. Obviously, a bye week, no game for Ohio State coming up on Saturday, of course. And with that being said, it feels like we wait so long for the season to get here, and yet here we are 3 weeks in and already the first bye week for your Buckeyes.
Well, and you know what happens, especially when you have a season like this, where there's 2 buys because of the extra Saturday between Labor Day and Thanksgiving. But you don't know if it's a good time or a bad time. It just depends on how you come out of it. But they're able to get 3 games in there. We like to tell people it's a bye weekend, not a bye week. They're practicing all the way through today, and then they'll give them the weekend off, come back Sunday night, and resume their normal week. So, but Ryan Day's calling it an improvement week. And even though things have gone reasonably well for 3 games, he and the coaching staff are still looking at areas that they can get better in.
Now that we're at the first bye weekend, as you guys called it, obviously, 3 weeks in, we've seen all different levels of opponents at this point. We've seen all different kickoff times. We've seen a lot of variables outside of them playing on the road at this point. Who are the Buckeyes right now? If someone hadn't watched a second of the Buckeyes and they asked you, Paul, to get, what's the identity of this team? Who are the Ohio State Buckeyes as we sit here 3 weeks in, as weird as that sounds?
Well, I think, Justin, you can say that they're a team that is playing very high-level defense. They gave up a sloppy bomb the other night against the Bobcats, but their defense has really been on point. And offensively, they've shown the ability to be explosive in the 2 games since the opener. In the first game, they just kind of managed things and really didn't put, their quarterback, Julian Sayin, in a difficult position making his first start. But what we've seen in the last 2 weeks, they have the ability to hit the home run ball with a passing game. We're starting to see the development of a running game with great offensive line play. And we're starting to see, maybe a change in the pecking order of running backs. Bo Jackson looked really good the last 2 weeks. We know they still have a lot of confidence in C.J. Donaldson as well as James People. So an offense that can be explosive and a defense that is played at a high level.
What about if someone said, Paul, what worries you about this team? Not putting you in a position to say something bad about it, but what is it about this team that makes them vulnerable, do you think, at least as we sit here 3 games in?
Well, what we saw last week was they had some shutdowns in the red zone. That was not a good thing to have happen. And we saw Julian Sayin with a couple of interceptions. One of them was a ball that was tipped and was kind of up for grabs. So there's been a little bit of a turnover presence. I wouldn't say a turnover problem. Those would be the things to be concerned about.
No game coming up this weekend, but again, they're practicing, they're preparing because the Big Ten opener coming up a week from Saturday. And not only is it the Big Ten opener, it's their first road game of the season. Obviously, that'll present a challenge for a team with the new quarterback as well. But Washington, I feel like a lot of people are kind of overlooking them a bit. The atmosphere at Washington is phenomenal, as you know. And again, for that to be where Julian Sayin's going to make his first road start, that's going to be a tough environment. Do you feel like people are overlooking Washington a bit as we head into that?
Maybe just a little bit because they had a down year last year compared to being in the national championship game the year before, but they've got an exciting quarterback in Damon Williams. It's the second year of Kalen DeBoer being the head coach. We'll find out a little bit more about them this weekend when they play Washington State because they've really not had much resistance in their first 2 football games. So they might be a little bit, and that will be a lot. It's one of the loudest environments from a lot of people who have been there. Now, the last time we went there with Ohio State, it wasn't that loud because Washington, number 1, wasn't that good. And then number 2, there were about 10,000 West Coast Ohio State alums that were there. But it'll be interesting to see how this team responds to being on the road for the first time.
got the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, joining us now. Obviously, no game this weekend. Washington next up. Big Ten opener, road opener, of course, for the Buckeyes as well. The one thing about Washington as well, their run game, when you talk about the shutdown defense that Ohio State has been able to show thus far, we saw at times Texas, they weren't able to move the football on Ohio State a few weeks ago in the opener, but they could run on them. What challenges does Washington bring to the table? Obviously, the run game, as I mentioned, but they do bring some stuff to the table that we'll see them test the defense of Ohio State that we haven't really seen since week one.
Yeah, and I haven't had a chance to watch them yet this year. That's going to be what's going to happen after this weekend. But we know that Williams, the quarterback, can hurt you both running and throwing the football. So I'm not that familiar yet with some of the personnel they have. But, it's a program that went through a major transition. They lost Kalen DeBoer when they did and lost so many players to the transfer portal. So I'm kind of curious to, see. I've got my DVR set to record their game with Washington State. That'll be Sunday night, looking at that Monday morning, getting a better idea of what they've got. But anytime you go on the road and anytime you're Ohio State, that's kind of what they've earned from winning a national championship and being the brand they are. They get teams' best shots. But I would agree with you, Justin. I think Washington is probably not being talked about that much just because of the difficulty they had last year.
Before we get into some of the other top Big Ten matchups this weekend, Paul, it's interesting. We had Jason Fitz and some other guests on throughout the week, just obviously talking college football. And one of the topics was just a lot of the quarterbacks that were really being, propped up heading into the season. A lot of guys aren't having the type of seasons we anticipated at the quarterback position 3 weeks in, obviously. And one name that got brought up, you look at Julian Sayin, he's playing as good as any quarterback in the country right now. To go back to him real quick, just your thoughts on the development of him 3 weeks in and how he kind of stacks up against some of the other quarterbacks in the country as we sit here 3 weeks in.
Well, he's looked very comfortable being back there. You'd think that he's played more as a starter than he already has, but we've seen the accuracy. There have been a few balls that he's probably underthrown a little bit as the receivers have bailed him out, but we've seen him, be able to throw the deep ball. We've seen the quick release. But more than anything, spread the ball around to the playmakers. Now, Ryan Day is going to be one of those harping on taking care of the football, and, he hasn't done that entirely to the liking, but, he probably would only be to the liking if he hadn't had any interceptions at this point. But I think what we've seen is the fact that, and you hear from interviews with other players, Justin, he's become more of a vocal leader out on the field. But he just looks comfortable out there. He's a guy that looks like he's maybe more veteran than he's been, but the talent certainly shows when you watch him throw the football.
Before we let you go, just a couple Big Ten matchups this weekend I want to get your take on. Obviously, Nebraska, they're 3-0. They're going to be on CBS at 3:30 kickoff this weekend, this Saturday. They welcome in top 25 Michigan. This is kind of the first chance for Nebraska to kind of put what is supposed to be a highly anticipated season for them. They get to put their talents on display with Michigan coming to town. This is a big opportunity for them to kind of put their program on the map in the Big Ten at this point, to kind of show everybody, hey, we're a real player here. We've been winning some games the last couple of years, but we're really here to make some noise now.
It sure is, to see if they've taken the step forward that everybody thinks they have. You look at some of who they've played, and, it much like Ohio State and much like so many others, it's hard to know because the competition hasn't been the level of league competition. But this will tell us something. It'll tell us where they really developed with Dylan Raiola at quarterback. It'll also be another example for Michigan to see if Bryce Underwood, after a tough road game at Oklahoma, if he can kind of get back to where the Michigan needs him to be. It'll be the last game that Sharon Moore is suspended this season. He has one more next year he has to serve. So there's a lot of key elements to that. But more than anything, people just are anxious to see, is this the step forward that Nebraska has wanted to take?
Absolutely. You talked about the Washington at Washington State game coming up this weekend. You talked about a team just trying to prove to people that they could take that next step forward. A big opportunity for two teams in the top 25 showdown. Illinois, top 10 team in the country at number 9. They're going to be on the road at Indiana. It's kind of crazy saying I can't wait for the Illinois-Indiana game this weekend, but that's what a lot of people are saying, including me. This is going to be a fun matchup out of the Big Ten.
It sure is. I read an article, and I can't remember the date, but somebody, I think it was Illinois' coach, Brett Bielema, who talked about when's the last time Illinois and Indiana were ranked playing one another. And it might have been, the early 1900s. But, we saw what Indiana did last year. They've replaced some key pieces, but they've got some key pieces coming back. And Illinois, a 10-win season and a bowl win a year ago, a team that had, a win that maybe doesn't get the attention that it should by going down to Duke and beating the Blue Devils the way they did. And while Illinois gets so much attention for Luke Altmaier and a returning offensive line, They got 5 interceptions in that win at Duke. They returned most of, if not all, their entire defensive secondary. But Indiana has plugged and played with another transfer quarterback in Mendoza, who's come in and played really well and kept them going. So, I think it's going to answer a couple of questions. Was Indiana and what they did last year a flash in the pan type of thing? And is Illinois really a team that has taken a step forward and can possibly contend for either playing for a Big Ten championship or getting into the college football playoff?
All right, good stuff. Paul Keels, voice of the Buckeyes, every Thursday joins us here on the Justin Kinner Show. Paul, send us out with this. We've spent a lot of time on this topic this week, an unfortunate topic, of course. Former Buckeye Joe Burrow goes down in that game last week against, the Jaguars, and not out for the season, but out a good chunk, out the next 3 months. Just your thoughts on the Bengals quarterback going to be missing some key time.
Yeah, it just seems like Joe can't get out of the injury bug's way, and it's unfortunate. But, Jake Browning, despite the interceptions he threw Sunday, he was impressive in leading them from behind to win. I think it's encouraging. He's been in the system for a while. When he has played like he did a couple of years ago, he's shown some good moments. So, basically at 2-0, if they can kind of keep things at a status quo or, keep things reasonably well. And if Burrow does come back in December, like folks are hoping, who knows? But, what a big blow for a guy that just can't seem to shake the injury bug.
All right, Paul, appreciate your time every week as always. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
You got it, Justin. Take care.
All right. All right, that was Paul Keels on yesterday's show. Appreciate him. Keep in mind, every Thursday throughout the Ohio State Buckeye season, we're fortunate, of course, to get the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, to hang out with us and recap the previous week's game and some of the top headlines heading to the upcoming weekend. So, no Buckeyes this weekend, but he still gave us some time. That Indiana-Illinois matchup, it's just funny because, I know that it's a top 25 showdown. The winner of that top 25 showdown is going to get, talked about, and they're going to get some looks. I don't think that this is a battle of 2 national championship contenders, and they're top 25. I don't know if it's a battle of 2 playoff teams, but what it does is it takes programs like this. This is why this matchup, and we're going to talk about this when we come back, this Illinois-Indiana matchup, it's a matchup that proves me wrong, or that is proving me wrong on my opinion on the expanded playoff. And we'll discuss that more in depth when we come back. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. I don't admit when I'm wrong often, but I think I was wrong about this playoff. I'll tell you why next. All right, everybody, we welcome you back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio. Week 5 of the high school football season. How about that? Coming up tonight, our Week 5 Gridiron Game of the Week features the Fairmont Firebirds welcoming in the Wayne Warriors. We're excited for that one. Keith Byers and I will be on the call for that coming up later on this evening. 6:30 pregame coverage begins, of course, with kickoff at 7 o'clock. Excited for that matchup tonight. Wayne last week defeated Springboro 48-23. And then, of course, Fairmont, they get a huge win last week as well over Centerville, 20-17. These two teams, obviously out of the GWAC, we call a lot of GWAC games. We like to bring you some of the biggest matchups in the Miami Valley each week. A lot of those games do reside in the GWAC. There's big games across the board. We just have a good relationship with the GWAC. That's one reason why we bring you so many of those games. But that's one reason why we do like to highlight our top individual performers. Every Monday, we like to kind of comb through some of the biggest performances from around the Miami Valley. Some of those, yes, out of the GWAC, but we've seen a lot of big performances from individual players throughout, whether it's the Southwest Buckeye League, of course, whether it's the Miami Valley League, whether it's the wherever. GCL, doesn't matter. We appreciate all the individual performances throughout the high school football season, and we look forward to that. Now, if you do head to wingam.com, all right, because we only do call one game a week, we do miss a lot of games throughout the Miami Valley. If you're at a game and there's an individual performance that you want to make sure we highlight on the show, head to wingam.com and you can submit your star player, and that player will get a shout out. And by the way, not just football, it's volleyball, it's softball, it's baseball, it's basketball, it's any sport, track, golf, doesn't matter. If you want an individual performance highlighted from the high school ranks on the show, by all means, please submit those great performances at wingam.com, and I'll be glad to make sure we highlight those great performances here in the Miami Valley. Okay. Switching gears here to college football. Actually, we were just on college football with Paul Keels. Appreciate him. We re-aired that from yesterday, of course. Buckeyes are on a bye week, but the Big Ten has some interesting matchups this weekend. And the one I keep bringing up, I keep laughing just because, like, when you think of the Big Ten, you don't think of Illinois and Indiana, right? Like, there's nothing intriguing about those two programs. But I'm very intrigued by these two programs this weekend. Indiana is the number 19 team in the country, and they welcome in Illinois. All right, they welcome in Illinois for a top 25 showdown. It's a 7:30 kickoff on NBC. And I got to say, there's the one reason I'm intrigued by this is, yes, it's a top 25 matchup, but let me be honest. If the playoff was still a 4-team playoff format, I still wouldn't care about this game. You know what I mean? Like a top 25 showdown that gets your attention. But in a 14 playoff era, 9 versus 19, Illinois versus Indiana, I don't think it draws people in. I think in a 12-team playoff, it definitely gets people to buy in and get people intrigued. Like we saw, and mainly because there's a proof of concept already. We've already seen Indiana make the playoff. Indiana was a playoff team last year. Indiana, along with Ohio State and Oregon, Big Ten playoff teams, Penn State as well. Like we saw 4 teams from the Big Ten in the playoff last year. Indiana didn't fare well, but I mean, they got an early farewell, but you know what I mean? The bottom line is I was wrong about the expansion of the playoff. I was wrong. I was wrong on many levels. I've got proven wrong in the first month of the season. This is year 2 of the 12-team playoff. Last year was the first year, just kind of a wait and see. You sit back. Obviously, Ohio State lost to Oregon, in mid-October. Then they didn't lose again until Michigan. Obviously, they still make the playoff and they go on to win a national championship. But my big concern about the expansion of the playoff was that it was going to water down the regular season and that, no one's really going to care about the teams who are ranked in the double digits and who really don't have a shot at winning a national championship, this, that, and the other. I didn't think people would care. I didn't think I would care. But I'm wrong. The Ohio State, I got proved wrong twice on this because the Ohio State-Texas matchup, I was like, that matchup, it would be sexy if it was a 14 playoff format because it's almost like that was a playoff game and the loser's eliminated. And, you don't want a season ended in week 1. That's not good for business, big picture. But my gosh, for that moment in time, that game would have you on the edge of your seat and you would be locked in, right? So That's how I felt like it would water down those games. I was watching Texas, Ohio State, and it was kind of a relief to watch two teams debuting new quarterbacks, two teams who are national championship contenders, but two teams with deficiencies, and two teams with deficiencies that are national championship contenders that still have an entire season to get better. Rather than tell Texas that because you lost, you no longer have a chance to compete for a national championship, I think that would be bad. That's bad for college football. If you eliminate a brand like Texas out of the mix week 1 of college football, I know for the urgency standpoint and the storyline perspective, week 1 of college football, I'm locked in. But now after that Ohio State-Texas game, moving forward, I just don't pay attention to Texas. That's not good for college football. Texas lost that game. Everybody's still locked in on Texas because you want to see the development of Arch Manning or see if he's overhyped or overrated or underrated, whatever. And you're still watching a championship contender. You know what I mean? Like if had Ohio State lost, would they, and technically even in a 4 team, maybe those 2 teams, the loser's not really eliminated, but you're pretty dang close. You have to be perfect the rest of the way. Look at some of the problems that both teams are having since that game to expect Ohio State and Texas to be perfect. And, to Penn State's credit and others, like they're going to have Oregon coming up around the corner. There's some big games, I was wrong. Big Ten football seems more interesting now because of the 12-team playoff, because more teams have a shot. When it was all about a national championship, there's only a handful of teams every year that can win a national championship. So if the only goal, if the only opportunity, if the only end game is to win a national championship, we're only really, with all these programs, we're only following a handful of teams. I was wrong. I'm going to keep saying that because some of you are saying, I told you, Kenner. Yes, you did. I think Shaw and some others. So I'm admitting I was wrong. There you go. I was wrong because I think that this weekend's slate of Big Ten games is fascinating. I think it's fascinating. Maryland, Wisconsin, there's no playoff implications there. I don't think, Maryland's 3-0 to their credit. Maryland is 3-0 on the season. All right, but they haven't beaten anybody. They beat Florida Atlantic, Northern Illinois, and Towson. They're probably going to beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not good, but then they're going to have to play Washington and Nebraska. They'll probably beat UCLA. They'll play Indiana. They'll play Illinois. They'll play Michigan. Like Maryland, water will find its level, no doubt. All right, but you continue to go down this list, and coming up later on tonight, Iowa and Rutgers. Not a whole lot going on there. To Rutgers' credit, though, they're 3-0. They barely beat Ohio out of the MAC, by the way. They beat Miami. Rutgers, MAC champions, baby, right there. Rutgers, though, how bad is Rutgers' defense? The fact that they've given up 58 points. They gave up 58 points the first 2 weeks of the season, and they played Ohio and Miami of Ohio. Rutgers is 3-0, but my goodness. Sorry, I'm veering away from this, but I'm just looking at Rutgers' schedule, and I'm like, my goodness, they've given up 58. They've given up 68 points in 3 weeks. Guys, Rutgers has played Ohio out of the MAC, Miami of Ohio out of the MAC, and Norfolk State, and they have given up 68 points in 3 weeks. That's impressive. To give up 20-plus points per game to on average to 3 non-Power 4 teams. Wow. And they got to play, and Rutgers has to play Washington and Oregon and Ohio State and Penn State. And I apologize, I skipped over Illinois. Rutgers defense, my goodness, keep an eye on how bad that can get in some of these games moving forward. But no, back to the point at hand. The playoff, the expansion of the 12-team playoff has made me scoot to the end of my chair to pay attention to this. This Michigan-Nebraska game 2 years ago, I wouldn't have given a rip about it. Even with Nebraska having some hype. Nebraska's good this year. The quarterback's interesting. All right. Patrick Mahomes 2.0, baby. You know what I mean? He's Patrick Mahomes cosplay. But Nebraska, they're good this year. They're good. They're not national championship contender, but they're good. In the 14 playoff era, good is boring. I don't care about good in the 14 playoff era. I care about elite. And if you're not elite, I just kind of brushed you off. But in the 12-team playoff era, good is interesting. Good creates storylines. Good creates intrigue. And Nebraska is good. And you have top 21 Michigan in town. Top 21, top 25, but they're ranked 21 in the country, by the way. Michigan at Nebraska. And what's crazy is Nebraska is, a 1.5 dog I mean, Nebraska beats Michigan this weekend. That is ginormous for the Cornhuskers. That's ginormous for Rule. That's ginormous for cosplay Patrick Mahomes. That's big time, guys. Like that. This is a huge game coming up this weekend. That game's on at 3:30 on CBS. I'm excited for Michigan and Nebraska coming up this Saturday. Notre Dame and Purdue. You know, I'm not really excited about Purdue Notre Dame, but that's another one. That's a 3:30 kickoff on NBC and Peacock. Washington at Washington State. We're going to be keeping an eye on Washington this weekend because that's Ohio State's next opponent. They have a running back, and look, the running back for Washington and Jonah Coleman, he has 39 carries and 288 yards and 7 touchdowns on the season. Now, he's only played 2 games. So he's nearly averaging 140 plus yards per game on the ground, and he has a game with 2 touchdowns and a game with 5 touchdowns. That's Washington's bread and butter, is the run game. We're going to learn something about Ohio State a week from tomorrow when they play Washington. I'm very excited about that game because I think although Washington's not going to be a huge test in regards to a championship contender, they have such a dominant strength in their offense that I think that's going to be a good learning opportunity because I saw Texas run the ball pretty good against Ohio State. I would like to think that the run game's been buttoned up since then, or run defense. If not, Washington can make it a little interesting. Washington's a 20.5-point favorite on Saturday, tomorrow, 7:30 the kickoff on CBS and Paramount Plus. Michigan State and USC. This is the one that has everybody's attention. I'm laughing. USC somehow got into the top. You beat Purdue, and somehow that puts you in position to be ranked in the top 25, whatever. But USC is an 18.5-point favorite at home with Michigan State in town. Ooh, that sounds like a good game. When can I watch? Well, all you have to do is just wait up until 11 p.m. on Saturday night to watch Michigan State at USC. How about that? 11 p.m. Eastern, Michigan State at USC, as far as that goes. Look, I see a lot of people pissed off about that. But how do you think USC and UCLA and these other schools feel when they have to, go to Columbus for a noon kick? And, that's a 9 a.m. kick their time. When Oregon has to play at Ohio State, it's a noon kick. It's 9 a.m. their time. That's why last year when Ohio State played at Oregon, we knew it was not going to be a noon kick. You will never see USC play a home game on the big noon kickoff. You'll never see Oregon or Washington or UCLA. UCLA will probably never be a big noon kickoff because, my God, snooze fest. But the bottom line is I don't feel bad for Michigan State. USC, good for them. Getting to play in their home field, to get to play at 8 p.m. game their time. Good for them. I don't have a problem with it nonetheless. So I bring all this up to get to the matchup that I'm most interested in, and that's Illinois and Indiana. Illinois is a top 10 team in the country. I don't think they're a national championship contender, guys. You know what I mean? Indiana's number 19. They have a chance to get a top 10 win this weekend. And if they get a top 10 win, that's going to propel them probably into the top 12, top 10, possibly. I'm very curious to see what happens with Indiana if they do win. So I sit here and I'm going to be watching this very closely. Somehow Indiana is a 6.5-point favorite at home over Illinois. I mean, not somehow, but they're at home. They're a 6.5-point favorite. This type of matchup right here is cool to me. And because it sets up a domino effect down the stretch, like Ohio State will face Illinois in a few weeks. That could be a top 10 showdown. Ohio State already had a 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3 showdown with Texas. Now you're going to have a potential top 10 showdown with Illinois here in a few weeks. And then Ohio State, of course, keep in mind that they're going to be a team that has Texas, has, Illinois, and they're going to have to play Penn State on November 1st. And then they'll play Michigan, who will be top 25. Like, Ohio State would have played a very, very good schedule. And I think Washington's only played 2 games. They had an early bye week. So I think if they, blow out Washington State this weekend and they play tight with Ohio State the following week, Washington could end up being a ranked win for Ohio State by the end of the season. So the Big Ten is presenting a lot of challenges for Ohio State. Not really challenges, but resume boosters, no doubt. But yeah, like I said, without the 12-team playoff, I have no interest in Illinois and Indiana. It's a top 25 showdown. One of the teams is a top 10 team. I don't think either are national championship contenders, but I think both. This is a matchup to propel you into the playoff conversation. Indiana wins on Saturday, tomorrow. They're in the playoff conversation. Illinois, if they win, they're obviously in the playoff conversation. And the loser, technically, not out of the playoff conversation, but I think we won't buy in. I don't think we'll buy in as much if that's the case. But Illinois, they're going to have USC. So, Illinois is in a tough little stretch right here. They have top 25 Indiana. And then a week from tomorrow, they're going to take on top 25 USC. And then they're going to take on Ohio State. But if Illinois, if their only loss is, like, let's say they do lose to Indiana and they but they beat USC, and then they lose to Ohio State, but then they go on to beat Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern. Illinois, a 2-loss team, could maybe still be in the hunt. You don't ever know. That's what I love about the 12-team playoff. It's giving those teams a chance. I didn't think I would care about that, but I do. I care about the Illinois now. I care about the Indianas. I care about those teams, and I never even gave 2 seconds of any interest or care whatsoever during the 14 playoff era, because the 14 playoff era, you had to have 4 elite teams to make up that playoff, that playoff field. You don't have to be elite to make up the 12-team playoff field. You just have to be good. Good is good now. Good was not interesting in the 14 playoff era. Good is interesting now, and I think that's a win for college football. So I was wrong. I enjoy the 12-team playoff format. Home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Have a good weekend, everybody. Again, high school football tonight. Keith Byers and I will be on the call as Fairmont welcomes in Wayne. 7:00 to kick off our Gridiron Week 5 game of the week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Keep an eye on the Reds. Keep an eye on Illinois, Indiana. Go see Kev Nash and Keith Byers at Frickers in Miamisburg for the Sunday morning tailgate show on Sunday morning at 11:30. Have a great weekend, everybody. It's been the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers.